been very lucky enough to be working in VR and AR for about 5 years now. And yeah, I thought a good topic to talk to you guys today would, and I think sort of in general, a good talking point is post-metaverse, right? So why on earth would I do a talk about something called quote-unquote post-metaverse from VR? Well, this little graph behind me, I don't know if you can see it super well, but this is the search traffic for the term metaverse. It was like non-existent, and then this huge spike when Facebook changed their name. And since then, it's sort of petered down and down and down, because as the hypes died down, and then searches for the word meta, which is just a sort of regular English word, as well as a massive multi-billion-dollar company, have continued to grow in popularity. But the word metaverse itself has seemed to have fallen off a little bit. So that's what I'm talking about when I say post-metaverse. That's not to say that the technology has faded away at all. In fact, it's the opposite, right? The technology has improved. So while the technology has changed, we've just changed the way that we talk about it. And the term that I've kind of always really liked is extended reality, because we go from normal reality and we encompass augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality under one umbrella, mainly because we see these technologies converging over time. We see it a lot now with the Oculus headsets. More and more, they're integrating pass-through technology, and big corporations are getting behind that mixed reality technology more and more as time goes on. And there's I think it sort of logically makes sense to group those technologies under the extended reality banner, although obviously there's a lot of nuance between the different aspects of it. So this is the earliest reference I could find to extended reality. This is a book called Pygmalion Spectacles, which is from 1935, which is just a fantasy sci-fi story about somebody who finds these magical glasses that take you to a magical world. And I put this in here to show that the concept of virtual reality and extended reality has been around for a very long time. So it's not going to go away or disappear just because a particular search term doesn't seem to be doing super well. The technology has been growing and expanding and becoming more widespread as time goes on, no matter what we call it. So this is the little agenda of the things I wanted to cover. First, we're going to talk a little bit about some context, a little bit of inspiration, some cool projects that I think are really cool, some practical tips and tricks, and then some questions at the end. So I'm going to go sort of relatively quick through this stuff because I think slideshows are a little old at this stage, but I still think there's some important things, and these are mainly just to be pointers for me to remind me what I was going to talk about. So hold your questions for the end, and then hopefully we can have lots of time for questions and interaction, because I think that's what this technology is all about, is interacting. So just a couple of things so that we're all on the same page when it comes to context. So the most obvious and important question is, why would anybody work in extended reality? Well, for me, the answer is super simple. It's the fact that the smartphone is constantly evolving. It's gone from like old clunky car phones in the 80s to what we have now, which are like fancy big glass bricks. I think what's really interesting about this particular little illustration is look how more visual these devices have gotten over time. So they started off with like a very small, simple screen, got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then we decided, okay, actually what we really want is lots of color, lots of fidelity, and like a wide visual range. And now we get huge phones, like the new iPhones are massive. So while this is a cool illustration of how phones have changed over time, what really interests me is where this graph is going. What are the devices on that side actually going to look like in 2 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years? They're probably going to look very, very, very different. And that's the point I want to make here. This is why I work in XR, is because I know that these technologies are going to change over time. How do I know that? Because every week or so, a new piece of news comes out and a new headset gets dropped or a new smart glasses, it's constantly changing. So just the other day, the Oculus Quest 3 was announced. In a couple of days' time, it looks like Apple's going to announce their own headset. So these things are constantly changing, and it's more. This is the most exciting this particular space has ever been. Even though in the media it might be overshadowed by AI at the moment, it's still a very exciting space to be. So just one little sort of tip that I wanted to add is Kickstarter and Indiegogo. These crowdfunding platforms are such a great place to find new pieces of hardware. I'm particularly into smart glasses because I think it encompasses the XR range really, really well. I would strongly recommend keeping an eye on Indiegogo and Kickstarter and GoFundMe, these kinds of places. Okay, so the next piece of context is that XR is still a niche. Most people have augmented reality devices because most people have smartphones, but VR and mixed reality devices are still relatively rare. And I don't necessarily agree with the mainstream narrative that it's because of the price. I think it's because we are currently, with this level of technology, we're not able to fulfill the dream and the promises of the fidelity of virtual reality that we've been sold in the media. So that's Ready Player One. This is just a shot from the movie. It looks very hyper-realistic, which is very, very unlikely to pull that off, especially on a standalone headset. And then there's some marketing materials as well that sort of sell us the dream, but then when you actually go and spend the money on it, it ends up not really fulfilling those promises. So I suspect that's why there's a bit of a discrepancy between, or a relatively slow uptake of headsets. So we try to measure empirically what this situation looks like in Africa, and one of and you can check it out at africaxrreport.com. You can have a look at the full report. It's there for free. You can download it. Feel free to share it. But one of the interesting takeaways I thought was that nobody has a comprehensive, detailed set of data. Even Meta, who have a very good data set of how many headsets have been sold, are very unwilling to share exactly what those numbers are. Maybe because they don't want to let HTC know what their numbers are, or maybe they don't want to let Huawei know what their numbers are. So there's a kind of a bit of a closed off sense of trying to figure out empirically how well adopted these technologies are. So I tried to get a recent picture of who's got a good round number of how many headsets are out there in the wild, and Steam has some very rough estimates, and they show that Oculus Quest is still super popular, and wearesocial.com shows that roughly, I mean, you got to take all of these estimates with a big pinch of salt, but roughly 5.6% of people have VR or mixed reality headsets. It's impossible to know the exact number, but my point is that these technologies are still relatively niche at this stage, which is a good thing because it means that we're on the ground floor. We're here early. We're building and creating these things at a time where there's less competition and a lot of potential future payoff. The last little bit of context I wanted to just make sure that we're all on the same page about is that hype comes and goes. In 2021, everybody was Googling about Bitcoin. In 2022, everyone was Googling about the Metaverse. And in 2023, everybody's Googling about OpenAI and generative AI. Tomorrow, it'll be smart glasses and brain-computer interfaces and nanorobotics. It constantly changes. So this sort of ties in with what I was saying about post-Metaverse. The technology is divorced from the way that we talk about it. This is just another Google search showing a spike in the search terms for Bitcoin, Metaverse, and OpenAI. Very predictable, one year after the other. If you ever see this graph, just run, because I think it's real rubbish. It seems silly to me to plot all sorts of different technologies on a single curve that always looks the same. I think what's more accurate is what I call the complexity spaghetti, There's lots of different companies, there's lots of different industries, and they're all interconnected, and every day it changes. It doesn't make for a very sexy graph, but it's more realistic and true. So, right. So just to recap, hype comes and goes. XR is still a niche for now, and smartphones will continue to evolve. Right. Hopefully none of you would fight me on that, because we all decided to attend this thing. So I think hopefully we're all on the same page about that. So the next bit I wanted to share is like some really awesome projects that I've seen that sort of inspire me to do better work and to create cooler things. So Niantic, owned by Google, created Pokemon Go, which is like, as far as I know, is the most widely successful augmented reality game in the world. They've just recently announced Peridot, which is like a augmented reality pets. And I think, like, theoretically, that ticks so many boxes for me. It just seems like such a great idea. You don't have to worry about cleaning up the poop. You don't have to worry about taking them to the vet. You can customize them and make them different colors. You know, this particular project gets me super excited. Hopefully it works out. You know, that's the other thing. We never really know if something's going to be a hit or a miss until it's actually out there. All right, so this next one is Re-Educated. Sam Walson, the New Yorker, and Nick Rubin got together, and they created this really amazing animated 360 film about re-education camps in China. It's a really interesting sort of artistic exploration of a very serious topic, and you can check that out on YouTube for free in VR. It's and they ended up winning an Emmy for it too. It's just such a profound and interesting story. And I think what really struck me about this is that it's more about the storytelling than about the technology. The animations are beautiful and they lend themselves to the storytelling process, but it puts zero emphasis on the technology and 100% emphasis on the storytelling and the actual heart of the project. Let's see what's next. Welcome to the Other Side is quite a cool project that I like to bring up every now and then. It's a little old now. It was a New Year's Eve party from 2 years ago, I think it was, where just after Notre Dame Cathedral had burnt down, the guys from Vroom in France rebuilt the cathedral in VR, and they hosted a big Jean-Michel Jarre party in VR there. And as far as I know, it's the most widely attended VR event in history. Really interesting concept, taking something that was very dear to those folks' heart and recreating it, bringing it back to life, breathing new life into it, and at the same time exploring a new way to use the technology. They do have a more recent project up, but this one really stands out for me. So Space Explorers, the ISS Experience by Felix and Paul Studios, they created this awesome project where I think it was the first time and only time that 360 cameras have been in space, and they filmed spacewalks. They filmed the life of astronauts. Really interesting little piece they did there, and they've done so much good work over the years. I'd strongly recommend checking that out in a bit more detail. The Soft Machine. So my friend Malcolm here is using this world here to like stream content from the metaverse to YouTube. We're actually doing a little watch party for the Apple announcement on Monday. But you know what we're trying to do differently here is create video content from the metaverse. Just a fun way to try and explore the different possibilities of using virtual reality. So Bloodbath is another super inspirational story. Tim Voronkin at the time was a 16-year-old Ukrainian guy studying computer. He was doing a bit of 3D work at his college, and he applied to join the Go East accelerator workshop, and built out this like protest piece that tells the story of Snake Island just off the coast of Ukraine that told these Russian warship to jog on in less polite terms. And he ended up creating this really interesting piece about it. Really young guy, very strong views and very powerful message that he wanted to share, and ended up winning Spirit of Rain Dance last year, sharing it with our own Rick. So I would also recommend checking that one out. It's also available on VR Chat. This is another great one. Gary in the group here just showed me this the other day. I really enjoyed it. Such a great concept as well. So the guys at Eden have created this amazing content that shows off, well, that teaches kids about the procedures that they're undergoing to help put their minds at ease by placing a headset on them and teaching them. And the one I did was about getting an injection, and it was really, really well done to the acting and the filming and everything. It was just so beautifully put together. So definitely check that out. All right, and then I think this is the last one I put in here. Gorn is still one of the biggest smash hits in virtual reality as a game. It's a gladiatorial fighting game that was made by Free Lives down in Cape Town. So we've got these real heavy hitter companies and teams and individuals right here in our own continent. So that's just like a tiny, tiny little sample. Like that's a minuscule drop in the ocean, those projects, because there's so many other projects out there. So importantly, please do your own research and let us know what you find. Let us know what inspires you. Share it with groups like Electric South. Share it with your friends, your colleagues. Get the word out there, because there's some really amazing projects that really do deserve a lot of love and attention for their hard efforts, their hard work. All right. So for the practical bit, there was this little diagram I wanted to share with you guys, and I'll go through it super quick because I think you get the gist of it when you check out the diagram. It's pretty self-explanatory, and I'll send the slides to you guys if you want to get a nice high-res version of this graph, this picture. But a very important question to ask when trying to build our own virtual reality or augmented reality or extended reality projects is, how the heck am I going to go about doing this thing? And a lot of us start up here with the plot and the story and the events, because that's the sort of more traditional storytelling technique, right? So what I'm suggesting with this diagram is that we rethink that process a little bit. So I've actually just recently started to use this rubric, right? And instead of starting with the story, what I'm proposing is that we start down here with the more technical foundations. First thing is know your audience. Who is this piece of software or who is this artistic piece going to be for? What is that? What are they looking for? What are they into? How exactly are we going to really hit the mark with this thing? From there, we need to figure out if it's going to be a high-end or a mobile experience, because that dictates what engine we're going to use. It dictates what kind of technologies we're going to use. It dictates what kind of hardware the audience is going to use. So are we going to go high-end or are we going to go mobile? From there, we need to figure out, well, okay, does it make sense to do this, make this available on the web? Does it make sense to have it as a VR experience? Does it make sense to have it as an AR experience, or maybe something else, maybe a 360 video, and so on, right? Once we've got that bedded down, we can look even more into the nuts and bolts and say, are we going to use Unity for it? Or are we going to use Unreal for it? Or are we going to use some other platform for it? When it comes to augmented reality, there's loads of different options and tools out there. And then once we've got that bedded down, there are some template code. There's some template code like, say, AR Foundation, for example, that is for Unity, that creates apps that run on mobile. So you see what I'm doing here. I'm saying, technically, how are we going to do this? And once we've bedded that down, let's go into the story. Let's go into the plot. Let's go into the twists and turns. What is the UI going to look like? And so on. So it might be a bit of a novel way to think about it, but I think it's also a very practical way to think about creating these things. So I'm gonna fly through each of these just super quick. I know I just have sort of gone through them, but I'm gonna do them super quick so we can get to the Q&A, and maybe we'll do a little world hop while we're here, because I know you guys are keen to check out some cool stuff. So just knowing your audience, this is sort of like a bit of a no-brainer when it comes to like developing a product. Know who that product is for, but you know, I know Electric South likes to find artists who aren't necessarily who don't necessarily emphasize the like product market fit or the business aspect to it. They just want to make something really cool and say something new and say something that represents themselves. But just remember that art's audience desires novelty, which is, you know, that fresh, interesting new statement you want to make with your art, but also something that's justified. Where does it come from? How did that story come about? So I'm not going to just sort of right. So the next one was what kind of technical limitations and trade-offs are we going to make? Just consider fidelity is like how good something looks. You know, there's this a lot of people who play around with Unreal go, oh yeah, look, it just looks incredible, but something that looks incredible isn't necessarily interactive and it isn't necessarily accessible. So if you want something that's really high spec, it means you've got to sort of cut down on the accessibility or the interactivity. And vice versa. You know, if you want something that's very accessible, like something that runs on everybody's mobile phone through a browser, that means that your fidelity might not be quite as high as, say, a Hollywood movie because of those sort of balancing act that you have to play there. So just bear that in mind, I guess. And I guess don't be shy to tell somebody, look, you can't have that. You can't have it all. You can't have Hollywood-style VFX while also running on a mobile phone that's infinitely replayable. So you'd have to have an infinite budget to make that happen. The sort of three streams that I guess I'm seeing at the moment in extended reality are, or particularly, I guess this is a little bit more for virtual reality, but you get video, mobile/web, and PC console. Those are sort of like three different like streams that I'm seeing a lot of recently. Video would be really high fidelity, like the Hollywood movie style. Mobile would be more like the Mona spaces that you see, and PC/console is like the big budget games that you'd find. So I guess just the moral of the story is just try and balance those things. Don't try and do all of them. When it comes to different engines, like there's a lot of debate and everybody has their favorite, but personally, I just think use the tool that makes sense. Use the tool that does the job that you want it to do. Don't get too bogged down in having favorites and saying one engine's better than the other. That doesn't matter because they're all good at different things. Sorry, it takes a second for my slides to change. So you can also fast track your proof of concept development. I know a lot of us like to experiment with like new ideas, new products, new projects. I've got a million projects I've started and a handful that I've finished, but you can fast track the development of those proof of concept projects by using a template such as, you know, like I said earlier, you could use AR Foundation, or My Web AR has some really cool template stuff. GitHub is just like an infinite treasure trove of really cool code that people have put on the web. So, you know, copy something, test it out, see if it works, change it up a bit, and who knows what'll come of it. The same could be said of the marketplaces. I know it can be intimidating to spend some money on those things, and it can be like really painful. I'm constantly saying like whether or not it's worth it, and usually it's better to create your own assets, but sometimes you just don't have the time or the luxury of time to be able to create everything from scratch. So have a look, see if there's something cool, and you know, don't be ashamed to make something your own. Then when we get back to this little graph, like, so we've covered the practical stuff, the feasibility stuff. What about story? This is not really the emphasis of this talk, but like I just had a couple of important things I wanted to share just relating to storytelling and concept. So beginning with what we're going to build and why, I think, is a really important question. And I think it gets glossed over a lot. We take things that we think are super obvious, but we don't take the time to explain why they're obvious or why they're important. So the reason why you want to create a project is the most important part of that project. What is it and why? You obviously, if you're spending time on something, it means you care about it. Well, so take the time to explain why you care about it and show us why you care about it. Really, really important point. And I know it's super obvious, but like it gets glossed over way too much. Just a quick example. This is one of the first VR worlds I made that I was super proud of. And it's just this empty field with a tree standing in the middle, right? Simple concept. Why did I want to do it? Well, I still think there's something really magical about being inside your house, inside a room with a headset on, and yet like psychically you feel like you're outdoors in a wide open space. I think there's something, that's something that virtual reality does that is impossible with just about any other medium. So I wanted to test that theory out. And I ended up putting in a lot of time and effort and care and love into that project because I was trying to explore something for myself very personally and very intently trying to explore this concept. So then I fleshed it out a little bit, added a lot more trees, threw in a lot of fog. All my worlds are pretty misty. I really wanted to amp it up and really push this idea, push this concept, see how far it can go. Ended up making something that was not well optimized and super laggy, and then I learned a lot along the way. So then I optimized it like crazy, and that's the project I ended up using at Venice not so long ago. So when something is close to your heart and you deeply care about your project, explore it, see where it goes, and maybe something really amazing will come out of it. The next thing I wanted to talk about was who, when, and where. This is just sort of the foundation of world building. Who is the protagonist? Where are they at? Where are they going? And what do they learn along the way? This is another little template that I put together. And you can sort of play around with it, right? So let's take Luke Skywalker from the desert, goes to the Death Star to vanquish his evil father, right? It's very dumbed down, but you can sort of flesh out your own storyline by taking the very simple approach to it. And then you can bring all the bells and whistles onto it at a later stage once you've got the heart of the story down. But keep that plot line, that main thread in mind. So where does it take place? I guess the two main points I wanted to make here was you can make somewhere very relatable, like we've tried to do with this space here. It's quite warm and cozy. It's quite a nice place. It's somewhere you might want to sit down and, I don't know, just sit out and watch some TV or something. But at the same time, you could do something quite fantastical as well, which is why we put the floating moons in the background here. So there's a lot to be said about doing something that's very relatable, but at the same time very fantastical as well, and doing both. I think the same can be said for characters. You really want to make your protagonist relatable, but then you can make your other supporting characters a lot more fantastical. The other thing for the setting is when. Do you want to base this thing? Do you want to set it in the present, the future, or the past? Right? Pretty self-explanatory stuff. Right. And, I didn't want to get too bogged down in plots and stories, because that's not exactly my forte, but I just wanted to round out this little diagram that I had. Cool. So those are my tips and tricks. Hopefully there's something in there that you find useful. The other thing that motivates me, I think, is that we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. Please keep that in mind. Tomorrow is today.